Good morning. Yeah, I'm not called Trainer. I am actually called Viv. It is short for Vivian. It's always a good option to be talking about. It's a good icebreaker. And my clock's in our head. I'm based in Germany. That's one of the things that we can have with Teams going on. But what we want to do this morning is talk about this whole idea of part of your 365 packages, forms. But what do you do with forms? Where do they go to, and how can you actually leverage that to actually take a further step beyond just a form coming in? Forms are brilliant on their own. We'll show in a second how to create a form and a few of the features you can put on it. But what we want to then do after creating a form, we want to actually make it take actions, do something for us, because a lot of what we do in our offices and a lot of what we have to do all the time is repetitive. And there's a parts of the tools of Microsoft that actually helps with this repetitive nature and this automation. So without any extra ado, if you go into your office.com, which is where you can log into your account with Microsoft, your menu on the left hand side, when it decides to appear, will give us the grid, and the app launcher will give you all of the apps, including forms and including Power Automate. So I've already got that open, so we don't have to go through that process again. We've got forms here, and then we got the flows. As you can see here, if you've used forms at all before, this is kind of a slightly new layout that they've done. They've made it a little bit more graphical. Now, forms is comparable to something like Google Forms. It's not a be-all and end-all data capture system, but for basic surveys, quizzes, for internal forms for your staff and your team, for requests, for this sort of stuff, form is ideal. So let's have a quicker look at forms and what you can do with it. I'll close that to stop loading. On forms, you can create a form and you can create it into sections. And those sections, so you could ask a series of sections one by one. You give it a name. You can put images up here. You can change your color under theme. Now, if you want to spend more time looking at how to build forms and how to do that, we will spend, as I said, a few minutes now. But if you want more information on that, there is a full 30-minute that we've done on forms before, and that's available on the YouTube channel. So Rich will make sure that that comes through to you, and even that specific link afterwards. But you just put your title in, you can put an image in, you just put your description in, and then you add new. With new, you've got a series of different options. As I said, you can do sections. Sections are good for longer forms. It splits it up into little parts, your details, your request, your response type thing. And these are the kind of key ones that you might use. So you might have a question one. What's your name? What's your request about? You can decide it's a long answer or a short answer. You can decide whether it's a required question or not. If it's required, it must be filled in before they submit the form. And you can also do things like restrictions on some questions, which are things like you can make this has to be a number, or you can actually go for putting in also a subtitle. And a subtitle is used for describing the question a bit more. So you might say the reason we need this, or please, and so that's how you expand on the question. The question should be quite short and simple, and then the subtitle could be further details. We've got choice. With choice, you can actually put in a question. You've got choices here. You can add more and more options to it. And if you start putting in something like yes, Microsoft says you're probably going to want some of the other ones like no. You can delete them, you can move them up and down, and you can put in an other. So other is if none of these apply. You can give them the option to have multiple answers. So check all that apply. You can also decide that if it's one or two, you can actually have a drop down if it's just a couple. So you can also shuffle your options as well. So that's really useful. I think if I'm correct in saying the drop down comes in as an option on some of them when you've got less questions. Next one to have a look at is rating. So how did you rate our service? And you can decide how many stars you want, and do you want stars or numbers? The next one you can look at is a date. When were you in our store? When would you like this to happen by? When are you submitting this form? All of those data. Ranking, put them in order. So which do you think is the most important? So that's the ranking one. So again, drag them up and down. You've then got the Leicard, and the Leicard is this one of these. I didn't know what they were called before either. Maybe you did. But you put in questions, you put in good, excellent, good, medium, whatever it is, and people go down this list. So it's one place to get multiple answers at the same time. And you've also got a net promoter score and you got file upload. File upload currently only works within your organization, so you can't put that out. And any files that come in go automatically into your OneDrive. So you can do all the questions you want. One last thing to talk about on this is you can also do branching. So branching allows you, it's not as good here. So let's look at this options one. Let's choose no multiple options and let's put in branching. Oh yes, drop down only works when you don't have multiple answers on, because obviously you can't use a drop down menu for multiple options. I should have clicked that. If I add branching, it allows me to set up where do you go from here. So choose your own story. So if I answer yes to a question, I can skip down to another section or skip through 2 or 3 questions. If I answer no, it might open up more questions and there. So I can go into the next form, go to a different question, go to the end of the form. When you finish doing all that, and I would always suggest you test it, you can test it yourself by hitting preview. So when you hit preview, you can see what it looks like on mobile, you can see what it looks like on computer, and you can test it and get submissions through. All your submissions come through automatically to your responses. So you can look at them from here, you can open them in Excel, and you can do all that. You can create a summary link for other people, but this becomes where you want to start the process of potentially automating this, making something happen when that form comes in. Your settings allows you to do things like print the form. Your settings also allows you to who can respond. Anyone at all, people in your organization, or this is new, specific people in your organization. You can put a start date and end date in. That allows you to have, you don't have to think about it. You set out the form and it expires at a certain time. And you can put a customizable thank you message in. Quite regular, I refer to data protection if I'm doing that. So you've got that, then you get the option to share. Now you're mostly going to share with this top one. So you can actually share only people in your organization, specific people in your organization, or anyone. If you do that, you can then copy the link, or we can shorten this URL. So we get a short version of it. So instead of this big, long, crazy length of which they were before, it's actually just that long. You can also turn it into a QR code. You can also get a link to embed on a web page, or you can send it out by email. It's probably going to try to open my email now. You can also get a link to template. So it creates a template that somebody else in your organization can make a similar one, or a link to collaborate. Now that allows more than one person to work on this at the same time. So that's forms. And as I said, once you start getting into them and testing them, there's not a lot extra that you do with that. There is a slightly different form that you can use, and I'll just explain what that is for a second, and then we'll start working with a couple of these forms. The slight difference one is a quiz. Now, a quiz is designed specifically. It's very, very similar. It's got nearly all the same features. The key difference with a quiz is you can give each answer a mark, and you can actually, if you want, you don't have to do that, but you can give each answer a mark, and then you can also, let's put in a choice. So you can actually give it how many points you want to give it, and from there, so this would be maybe a 10-pointer, and then you can actually put an answer in. So when you put an answer in, and there's options for maths. So once they answer it, at the end of the survey, you can decide to say, hey, this is your answer. So let's mostly used in schools, but it can be used as things like a knowledge check. And you've got themes and colors to make it look really nice. So there we go. That's forms and that's quizzes. Both very, very similar in what to do. What we're going to look at is 2 forms that I've got here. This one we created away last year as a sample. And just to let you see what it is and see what these 2 forms are before we go to the automate, I'm just going to open them in separate windows. So the whole idea of this is one of these is a capture form. So yes, we're calling it COVID capture. Hopefully we don't have to do that much in the future at all, but it's a system of saying capturing people arriving in your business, arriving in your organization. Now let's be clear here. This could be used as much for capturing a request from somebody in your team, capturing a change of bank details, capturing a change of address, capturing a request for a form, a holiday form, a purchase request, whatever it is that you want to capture. You ask the questions and that data comes in. So this is a very simple form. It's name, email address, phone number, address, and how many people in your party. So there we go. We had 4 responses at one stage. Then we've also got this finance request, which is what's the request for? What's the value? Is it within your budget? And is there any other information? And if this is an internal one, please put in a receipt image. Now, obviously, if it was a finance request, there'd be a lot more information normally in there, but these are just to give you some samples. So we'll come back and fill both of those in a second. What I want to jump across to is flow. And this again comes from your main menu. It's no longer called flow, it's called Power Automate. And this allows you to set up automations. It allows you to set up automations in your organization. So automations are things like, the simplest way of thinking of an automation is you already have some in place. If I give you an example of some of the automations that you have in place, if you set up an out of office on your email, that's an automation. When an email arrives, Microsoft automatically replies on your behalf. Now, we don't think of that as an automation. We don't think of that as a flow, but it's like a rule. So automations are rules within your organization. Microsoft have created this to make it easier for people to do, so that you don't have to get a full-on, like programming in to do it. And yes, it's one of these tools in the Microsoft arsenal you get as part of your subscription that if you delve deep into it, you can do so much brilliant stuff with it, and you can go down the rabbit hole as I joke about it. But there is a lot even on the surface through templates that make it an easy pathway into it to use it. So if you came to the home of this, I've got one approval, which we'll talk about in a minute. You've got loads and loads of templates available. Microsoft works with so many different services. It works with all of the services within its own system. So Excel, OneDrive, Outlook, SharePoint, Teams, etc. But it also works with external. You can see, for example, here, Twitter. And if you went down and looked at your, for example, you can spend a bit of time, you could look at connections. They now have over 400 different connectors. That means it connects to 400 different services. And within those services, you can do lots and lots and lots of different things. So you could look at this list and search all of them, and it's big companies externally, small companies externally, and anything that computers can talk to computers, you can actually do that here. So Adobe, for example, various other ones. So just maybe spend the time looking at it. What I want to do is I want to play with forms. So I'm just going to search my template for forms, and I'm going to use one of the templates that's available here. So that will make it as easy as possible. And what you can do when you get the templates, you can use the template as is, or you can start making change to it. So what we could actually do is we could actually create a template here, or we use this. So there's lots of them. Notify me and store the response when somebody completes the quiz. Send an email to the responder. So let's use that one. So when somebody submits their COVID capture information, I'm going to drop them back an email saying, thanks very much. That you've submitted your details, and in 21 days we're going to delete them off the system. So I'm going to use their template, and as I do that, Microsoft's doing a little thing down here of deciding to sign in. While it's signing in, let me explain one or two other things about Automate. You can create automates which are called cloud automates, and they're instant. So what happens is if you press a button, it would start to work. If something happens somewhere else, it starts to work. There's other ones that are timed ones. So for example, this form one is an instant one. When a form is responded to, it goes through. There's ones that you can do on a time, so you can check them every day. So go through this list of data every day and check if anything's being changed. They've also just brought out, they've had it out for a while, but they've just brought it out and made it free, is you can actually do what's called remote desktop automation. So if you go so far into it, you can actually make it do things on your computer for you. So if you always get that email and you move it and then you update a CRM system and it doesn't get supported through this, you can actually get it to make actions on your computer on your behalf, the same way a macro would on Excel. So this flow will connect to, and it tells me, Microsoft Forms and Office 365 Outlook, because it's wanting to send an email. If you've never signed in with these before, it'll ask you to sign in. And if it's an external service, it would ask you to sign in with your username and password. Here we could have different connections. So if it's you've got multiple connections, so we don't need to do that. We're just going to hit continue. So it's setting this up for me, and then I have to choose the options. So it's like setting up an Excel function, and then you have to choose which cells you're looking at. Well, this is setting up an automate, and then it's asking me to choose which form I'm going to be looking at and which email address that I want to send it to. So Yep, as it's loading. So here we go. When a new response is submitted, so it tells you what it's doing. It now tells me to pick a form. So great. So I'm going to use my drop-down menu here, and I'm going to go for COVID capture details. And it tells me lots, and there's help button here. If I'm using this long term, I suggest that people give them names and things like that. So what's the unique identifier of the album? Now, this is a strange one. When a form's submitted, you have to tell it what form. Then it says go and get the form details. So you have to do that. So if you were building one from scratch, you would have to remember to put both steps in. But now it's automatically filled this in. This is called the dynamic data. Let me click on this and show you what it means. If we've got here dynamic data, it automatically picks up the questions from the form, and it automatically knows that I'm looking for the response ID. So down here, it's put a condition in. This is like an if statement, and this is Microsoft's template for it. It's saying if the person is not anonymous, send them an email. If it is anonymous, we can't send them an email. Now, for us, I'd change this, but for time constraints today, we're going to use this. The reason that I would change it in this case is because I'm actually asking for their email address. So I automatically have their email address. So that's fine. I'm not going to go to town on that. That's fine. Here, I could actually say, again, this is an automatic setup from Microsoft, and this says send an email. So I could actually go there. It's saying from the response, get the body. So if I click on this is dynamic data again. We've now got 2 email addresses here. The one if it's not anonymous, but also the answer to the question. So I'm going to take out that, as simple as that, press the X button, and I'm going to click in email address. And I'm going to send them an email. And then you can write, thanks for filling in your details. Now this will automatically now send an email address through to that person. Now, I've changed that so you'll see it working in a second. The other thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to very quickly do this, I'm going to choose an operation. Just to show you how that happens, to make another step in here, I add an action. When I add an action, I'm going to choose an operation. And my operation, I want to work with SharePoint. And I'll explain the reason for a minute. Microsoft have a new thing. Again, it was always existing in SharePoint Lists. They've made it called Lists. And that's like Excel, but more powerful. So what I'm actually going to want to do here is I'm going to actually use SharePoint and I'm going list. And I'm going to stick this information onto a SharePoint list. So it's stored for me. So if we open up the SharePoint, that was me, search for SharePoint. It then gives me all of the actions that I can take for SharePoint. And it's useful to see this because you can see how many things are on this thing. Now, again, I could search here. So I'm just going to type in the word item because I want to create a new item in a list. So there we go. Create a new item in a SharePoint list. We can get them, we can delete them, we can update them, we can share a file, we can stop sharing a file. All of this can be done automatically through your system. So similar idea, where's my list? What list is it? So you choose from your menu. Now I know what's here, so I'm going to click on that. And then it asks you what's your list name. So I'm going to go for COVID capture. Once I do that, it takes a second, and then it opens up the different ones for me. So it asks me title, time of visit, name of visitor. So let's go through these. Name of visitor. So full name. What's the address? And again, we had that here. What's the address? Our top one. Email address. Now let me show you another thing. If I wanted to, and I typed email, it actually narrows down. So once you start using this a little bit more, you can actually very just quickly go into your dynamic content. I must not called it that. I must have called it phone number. I did. And you can find that information. So what Microsoft is now doing for you, it's sending that email, but it's capturing the information from those forms and putting it through. I can go for time of visit because I've got the submission time. And then Microsoft has a default automatic one that you must fill in under your title. So for that, I'm just going to put in again the submission time just to make it easy, or how many people in your party. I don't think I asked that question. So let's put that in as my information. I'm now going to save this. So that's my flow saved. I would normally rename it here. And before you actually make it live and allow people to use it, you can test it. So I'm going to test it manually. So this says submit a new response and then trigger it. So let's do that. So to trigger this one, it tells you how to make it happen. It's going to either wait for a file, it's going to wait for an email, it's going to see it at work. But this says to see it work, submit a new response to the selected form. So if I go back into my form and I go to preview, I have to preview it to get it actually into a format that will actually submit for me. And when this comes up, I'm quickly going to drop in some details to this and I'm going to see what happens to it. Give me a second, I'm going to change that because I want to actually show that it actually sends to us. It takes me a little bit longer to write this one. This is our 365 accounts, and I've spelled it wrong. Let's make sure to do it right, or else it will fail. On Microsoft.com. Yep, that seems to be correct. And now I've done this, I'm going to submit it. Now, my flow should now be sitting here and it should start working in a second. It can take a few seconds. Oh, it's told me already. My flow ran successfully. Now, before I go anywhere else to see what's happened with it, I can actually let this load again and it will show me all the steps that it took, one step by one step after the other. And hopefully it's picked up the fact that I'm not anonymous, and hopefully it's added this information to a list. If there's wrong bits in it, then we would choose edit. I'll hit a refresh on that as well. Come back out and let's just see if we can see the flow run separately anyway. I think it was signed in. I think it was only my organization. So here, just by the way, when you come to this, you can see everything about your flow as well. So again, if it decides to load properly, it tells me the information about it and I could change it. It tells me the run history. It took 11 milliseconds to actually run the flow and do the process. So things that can take you hours of your time can be reduced to a very, very small quick time. Now, here we go. We know that this has worked at this stage because here it's filled in the details that I submitted. There was 5 in my party. Time of visit is exactly the time. It's in UK time there. Name of visitor, the address I put in, the email address, and the contact number. Now, we could set this up, and there was another flow that we had to show how this would work. We had another flow, and what it did was after 21 days, it got rid of the details. It would check the date and went rid of the details. Going through the history, we can see each stage. So there we can see the form. Here we could click on it and see the response details and what happened with those response details, the information from the form. Here we can see the condition. That's decided to play up on me. Here we can see the condition. So was it a yes or a no? So it was a yes, so it came down here. Oh, it filled in the form anyway. That one says it ran successfully. I'll tell you what's happened here. It didn't do the anonymous. I have another form that does the same thing. We had another one that did the same thing that filled in that form. The reason it is this, we must have left this form as having the ability to be filled in by an anonymous party. So my if condition got confused. So you could either take this out or you could do it. But there you go how it shows you, and you could do a no down this line and still fill it in. You can do a yes down this line and put an email. The reason it filled in this form is we've already got that flow sitting somewhere else doing the same thing. But it shows you if you do make a mistake like that, you can just come in and see where the mistake was, and then you can go back in to edit it. So you could actually say, hey, I'm going to take out that condition because I don't need it because I'm going to have the email address in it. And if you wanted to do that, we could copy and paste those actions and move them out. Instead of going into detail in that one, let's have a look at this other one quickly because I want to show you one of the really, really useful options that we've got in Flow as well. So I'm going to create a brand new one from scratch. I'm just going to go for new, and I'm going to go for it's an instant one because it happens when a form is filled in. And so we go here, we give it a name, and I'm going to go finance request. And I'm going to look here, it gives me a list of different ones. So this one here, we're going to go for, you've got all these, forms, it should be forms, there's forms here. For selected message, for this, I think I've used the wrong one. I need to have a cloud flow. So let's go for automated cloud flow. That's what it is. Instant can do things like for a file. So for something in a Teams list, for a message in a Teams list, for a file. So if I go for finance request, again, I want to do this and have it through. And there we go, forms at the top. So I'm going to create it. You may see I've done this before. My first step will automatically be when a new form is submitted, because that's what I chose it to be. I'm going to go for the finance request one. I'm going to put in a new step. So this is building one from scratch without using the templates. I'm going to make it nice and simple, but I am going to build it from scratch. I'm going to type in forms again, because my next step has to be get the response details. So the first stage is when a form is submitted. Now the second stage is now go and get the details from that form. It seems a little bit of a long way around, and it is for forms, but the reason for it is every other trigger that Microsoft uses the same information. In this case, I'm not going to fill it in anywhere. Ideally, you would normally fill it in a SharePoint list. You can put it into a database automatically. You can put it into an Excel if you needed to. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use approval. And there is an approval system built into Microsoft. Now, the approvals only work internal to your organization. If you want to send out an email to someone and get a response, there is another action that you've got in this, which is called send an email with options. So you know those emails that you can get through and you can click on something these days that you can work with outside your organization. So if you want to send an automatic email to a supplier or a customer or a collaborator with you that had options that they could choose, you can do that. In this case, I'm going to start and I'm going to wait for an approval. What type of approval? So again, you've got options here. Everyone must approve, the first to approve, or you can set up your own. So I'm just going to go for everyone must approve because I'm only going to send it to one person. Now, please approve. And here, assign to, I'm going to put in my own email address. But again, this could be actually looking up a list somewhere. So it could be looking up a manager's list. There we go, we've got me, or it could be go to my manager. So it could look up somebody's name and then go to it. Here we can put in the details of it. So I'm just going to put in a couple of bits of information, request. So request for, enter, value. I'm not going to put all of them in here. You get the information, you get the idea, and let's go for any other information. And there are ways of getting the attachments through. There are ways of doing all of that as well. If we want to, we can put a link to the item. So if we've stored that somewhere, we can give them a link where they can read more about it. And under advanced options, if we want to, we can decide, is it notified? Can it be renamed? And you can even put attachments in there. Normally, what you would actually do at this stage is you would actually do, I'll do it. I know we've got 1 minute left, but I do want to show this. I'm going to put in a condition again. So we're going to do condition, and that's like an if statement. And what we're going to say is choose a value. And again, we're using dynamic data here. So I'm looking for the outcome of the approval. And if the outcome is equal to the word approve, because that's the options that you get, what am I going to do? I'm going to send an email, or I could update a file, or I could update someone else. But I'm actually going to send an email back. So I'm just going to look for an option of send email. On the other side of no, you can put your other options. Send an email saying, unfortunately, you need to update this. So I'm just going to send it from Microsoft, but you could send it from a shared mailbox. You could send it from your finance mailbox. You could send it from someone else. Now here we've got this. So I'm going to search for the email address of the person who's responded. And I'm going to write in the word approved. And we have to put in a content. So content of the email. So again, you could actually say things like, now you need to do ABC. And here under scheduled options, we can do things like blind carbon copy, people's names, we can put attachments in. Now please fill in this form. So let's save that. Let's test this one and hopefully I've set it up right, and this test will go perfect first time. So let's hit the button and let's hit test. I'll go to finance request. And what this then should do is when I've submitted this, it should send an email to the email address that I put in asking for an approval. That can actually be done on your mobile phone. That can be done on your email, or that can be done through the Power Automate app, part of 365. So I'm not going to put a receipt, and I'm going to hit submit. So over to my flow, which I've saved, and it should be waiting. Your flow is running. So it's got the response details. It should be starting and waiting for an approval. If I come across to here and look at my email, please work today. Let's just be nice to me. There we go. Up the top, Microsoft. Now, obviously, I've put in please approve. I could put in so much more information there. I could put attachments in, as we said. We could link to an item, but here we go. The information that I put in. Now, that word phone, value 600, and more info has all been pulled directly from the form by Microsoft for me. I can do an approval and I can put in great. So I can actually, when those responses come back, if it's a reject, I can actually put those in the response, fill them in the form, put them in the SharePoint list, whatever I need to do. And so when that comes back, then next thing that I should see in a second, the flow's still working. It does any other actions. In this case, there's only one. So if I do that and refresh, what it should then do is it actually should send me a little email to say that I got that. Now, unless I've left that as a random person thing and it hasn't actually captured my email, which it may not have done. So again, it hasn't captured my email from the form. So I must have left it as anonymous. And because I haven't captured it as an email, it won't bring it through. But it does show you here, it started and waited for an approval. I cut all those details and the outcome of it was approved. So obviously my form setting up wasn't as accurate as it should have been, and I should have set that form up on a setting that only people in my organization could do it. Because on my settings, here's what happened to both of those. I should have had this, and it should have specifically picked up my data for that to record the name of the person. And that's where it went wrong in my flows. But as you can see, that would be quite easy to fix. But I don't want to go and fix them now because we've over time. I want to come back and answer any questions that we have. And I hope that was informative and useful.
Cool. Thank you very much, Viv. Does anybody have any questions for Viv? I know we've run over slightly, but sure you'll appreciate there was a lot to get through on that. So I think Viv's done a cracking job. So if anybody wants to unmute and ask any questions or put it in the chat.
There's nothing in the chat, Rich. So we're okay on that side.
It's just one just appeared, Andy.
Yeah, got it. So, sorry, could you just recap on? Oh, sorry, just been overwritten by something. Yeah. Sorry, could you just recap on how to add an option on a blank form, for example, for gender, male, female, etc.
So an option on form, yeah, not a problem. So let's go into this form. We'll come out of the settings. I know it's finance request, but I don't want to start another form. Let's go down here. There, for example, it's like this. So is this currently within your budget? So that question was done as a yes/no question, and under these three dots. Remember, in Microsoft, when you're on the web page, by the way, and on various other parts of it now, anytime you show those three dots, it means more settings. So whether that's working on Word Online, whether that's working in Teams, whether that's working in Forms. So here under this one, is it currently in your budget? That more options gave us the option to give drop-down options. Now, if we wanted to have a different question here, and if you wanted to give choices, again, you could say gender. And you could put in, you could actually do, there we go, they've actually, Microsoft gave you suggestions. So we could add all of those in, and you could even add an other option. And if that's another option you would add, or you can add other. Now, once you do add other, that now gives them the option to type in their own answer. So you've got all of those.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool, nice one, Viv. Thank you. If anybody else hasn't got any questions, I'll finish up, but I'll just give you a quick. I think Sam's typing now, so we'll bear with it.
While that question's coming through, by the way, your automate, you can actually run it from Teams as well. So you can actually get the approval processes and stuff dropping into your Teams flow, and then you can respond from there.
Okay, no problem, guys. There's a couple of messages being typed in there, so well, oh, here we go. There's an equipment note from. Can you add the form directly to your website?
Yes. Under your form options, you have got under your share options, one of the options is this. And as long as you have someone knows how to put your form in as an iframe, as it's called, you just copy that information and you can paste it into a web page or Sway. Forms can also be put into your SharePoint pages. So if you've got internal SharePoint pages and you want the capture form at the bottom to say, I have read and understood, you can. Forms can be embedded into stream videos. So again, partway through a stream video, it can pop up and actually have a knowledge check. Forms can be embedded and linked straight to Teams, the responses and the capture. So basically forms can go anywhere. If you use the quiz button or in Teams, in a chat or in Teams, it actually uses forms. And nowadays, if you use a questionnaire option within Outlook, it actually brings it up as a form as well. So forms have become throughout everything Microsoft, and they can be embedded everywhere.
Yeah. Jess O'Neill just requested Rich some additional training on flows power automate, so could pick those up. Another question from Joe: can you download from an existing form, i.e. from Word, into the form?
No. Well, Word you can't. If you've got Excel, you can. If data was going into Excel, you could pull that in. You can't take data from Word. You can output data from Power Automate to Word. But you cannot grab data from Word, unfortunately. It's one of those ones that it's hard to basically anything automate in a kind of technical way needs to have some sort of boundaries. So in Excel you can actually use tables, that's what it uses, and everything else is unique references. When it outputs to words, it uses actually part of the additional tools that you have, including XML, to fit those information in. But unfortunately, you can't take it from an existing form in Word. You would have to create that form in Forms. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Viv. I can see that we've still got a couple of people typing, but I'll finish up for now, and then if we'll stay on and answer any more questions if you want to stay on. But thank you to Viv today for that really good presentation. It's something that we use at Affinity, certainly, and you'll find out in it shortly. Forms, how we use it with a feedback form. So thank you all for attending. I'll drop the email to you. Please do fill in the feedback form, give us some details. Jess, there will be some details about how we can look at if you need further training on that as well on the email, but we'll drop you a line. And thank you all for attending, and we'll speak to you soon.